Hey Mike, how you doing? Your video isn't on yet.
Boom.
Great to see you.
Likewise, my man. How are you?
How come it seems like the background changes every week to some degree?
Because I'm a meticulous person by nature. I'm always just trying to like correct things. So I fixed the camera here. I got the arm of the. Hopefully my audio is better. Hopefully the video is a little better. I have such great. I can't quite twist the camera, but there's a great photo of George St. Pierre and I on stage at the weigh-ins of Johnny Hendricks, very respectful. I had so much cool stuff here. I just trying to highlight it, man, trying to give the Leo and longevity audience all that we can in the little bit of time that we have here.
Well, Mike, honestly, this is one of my ambitions for the next year. Hopefully when I move is to, as you can see, I film in literally my library in the house. So yeah. I'm hoping to eventually build some kind of studio that looks nice like yours. Actually, hopefully standing, although I'm not sure how comfortable I'll be talking about scientific things standing. It may be a little detailed for me.
You never know, but me, like I'm Italian, so father's side Italian. So stereotypically we talk with our hands and move and whatnot. But I work better, I think, when I can move freely and talk a little bit. But also I got some lower lumbar herniation, disc bulge issues, just chronic, so if I sit too long, I hurt. If I stand too long, I hurt. So this is a very nice compromise.
Yeah, I have a lot of genetic polymorphisms associated with degenerative disc disease myself. Thankfully, it hasn't gotten so bad yet. And that's why I don't squat, for example, or do spinal loading type stuff, just because I'm concerned about it. But that's a great, hey, I wanted to ask you something, Mike. I was thinking to ask Duane on the show, but this is an interesting question. I wanted to ask you, are MMA analysts in general very astute? Like their analysis of competitions post-fight, which every week, the majority of the MMA videos every week are like pre-fight and then post-fight analysis. Yeah. Are the majority of those analysts very astute and knowledgeable about martial arts in the sense that, for example, a martial artist coach or an ex-fighter would follow along with their analysis? Or is it sometimes because they're not fighters a little bit, from the outside?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say it's probably 1/3 of the on-air color commentators and those with podcasts and blogs, because now journalism is really, it's such a wide category. My wife has a communications degree and she was a journalist by trade, print media. Initially, she worked for MTV and some other stuff through her career. So I'm very sympathetic to the plight of the journalist. Now, that being said, I've seen so many kids with iPhones call themselves a journalist, and I appreciate the aspiration, but you can't put yourself on the same level as someone who worked their whole life. They went through 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of graduate school to get a communications journalism degree, to have all the experience necessary, but also to truly understand the burden of proof with regards to reporting on facts. So I'll put that aside now. Now, I will say Ariel Helwani started literally with his iPhone. I remember Ariel back in 2007, 2008, interviewing me and everybody else with an iPhone by himself. And now, look at him now, he's doing amazing. So to answer the question in detail. Actually,
can we do a caveat there? That's one of the people I was most curious about, actually, was I've started to watch Ariel's show, and he's he has like a very encyclopedic knowledge about the different fighters and their conditions and so on. I was wondering, is his stuff, the analysis of the fights, is it based out of, like for example, comparing Morning Combat with Ariel's commentary?
That's Luke's show.
Luke, correct? Yeah, Luke seems like a great analyst to me, but I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, so I'm trying to learn.
It's hard because there's something special from the former fighter. So I think the former fighter, the guys like a Chael Sonnen or Daniel Cormier, Michael Bisping, Paul Felder, these guys, they do such a great job because they understand the psychological part of it. And you hear some of the non-trained journalists make statements like he should have changed his game plan mid-fight. He should have done this or he should have done that. That might be correct if we're just drawing on a piece of paper and, coming up with a T-score, a T-analysis, let's say. But when you actually break down the real world applicability of that statement, it doesn't make sense.
This sounds like this sounds like my commentary when I'm with my wife on the Saturdays. I make the stupidest comments. I'm watching the fight. I'm like, why didn't he dodge that one? Like, because I don't know what it's like being in a real fight. You couldn't have dodged it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. He's thinking the same thing. Like, why didn't I dodge that? But he might not have dodged that, or he might have not have stepped offline because he knows his opponent has a great left hook, let's say, or he's trying to get him to plant on that right foot so he can drive through and pick a single leg. There's a lot of things going on. Maybe he has a hurt ankle or he has a strained ACL, MCL, PCL going into it. So, and I only say that because there's so many different tiers of information. Now, I'm a huge fan of Ariel, and Ariel's, I think, the best at the non-combat trained journalist, where he's better than most. I'd say most, combat or not, Ariel's is the tip of the spear here. But there's a lot of others that don't. They don't aspire to put on a white belt, put on a gi, and just go roll a little bit. Feel what it feels like to have another human with some skill holding you down. He should have just squirmed out. He should have blocked that, rear naked choke. He tapped too early. Really? Like, have you ever been in that situation? And I only think that this offers greater context for the journalist. So it gives them a larger toolbox to pull from.
That makes sense. Now, by the way, did you notice in the last week and a half, Ariel has been getting a lot of heat? I've been noticing this on YouTube. There's a lot of heat from different directions, and there's a lot of drama going on. Yeah,
I think heel Wani, as they're calling him now. He's calling himself, which I love. The nicest guy out there, truly. I know him behind the scenes and in front of the camera. It's so cool to see a guy like him do so well, and he's deserved every accolade he's achieved along the way. But now he's the big guy. I know he's got some big contracts now. He's got a big platform. He added an extra zero or two to the back of that paycheck. So all the trolls of the world, they want you. It was like me when I was really moving up the ladder. I became the head guy, the best known, weight cutting specialist in combat sports. Every day there was a new article about some, thumb dick who I've never heard of, talking about how I don't know what I'm talking about, and just whatever they could say about me.
Yeah, well, you become a target.
I'm sorry?
You become a target when you succeed. Yeah,
you do, and that's fine. So I think guys like Brendan Schaub, who I'm friends with, also Brendan, they have a little bit of heat there. But I think it's because it's Fox News and CNN. You create the heat, it develops the story. I mean, God, bodybuilding is probably the best. This crap. I laugh at bodybuilding because they build this heat amongst bodybuilders. When has a bodybuilder ever thrown a punch? Or when have they ever done anything to back up the social media heat that they create?
They're going to do battle on stage, which every time I hear that, I'm like, bro, don't use that word, do battle. I mean,
it's disrespectful. I think even in MMA fighters are very aware that they engage in hand-to-hand combat. We put the military and law enforcement so far above what we do. We play fight. It's a game. People get hurt doing this, but there are levels to contact, and we understand that. And this is why I laugh at the bodybuilders, because I'm friends with a lot of the bodybuilders. I watch more bodybuilding content than fight content these days. But at the same time, I laugh at the false bravado of bodybuilders. Number one, name a bodybuilder who can throw a 3-punch combo that doesn't look like this. And
I actually want to discuss that with you and Duane later. I'm really interested in that subject. We'll talk about the strength training effects on punching speed and stuff. I'm really curious about that. By the way, he tried to join but left the conversation. I think maybe he had some difficulty.
Okay.
If he just tries again, he'll make it, I'm sure.
I'm just texting him.
Oh, take your time. No, but I was going to tell you more about the Brendan and Ariel thing. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I want to hear it. It's great. I mean, I watch the videos like a little schoolgirl, Me
too, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened to me. So basically 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had no idea Brendan has a show called The Fighter and the Kid. Yeah. So I started watching this show and I absolutely love it. It's hilarious. I watch everything on YouTube at 2 times the speed. So it's very funny for me. It's like a 50 minute laughter. And that's when I first heard about the Ariel thing. But then when I went and saw Ariel's response, one of my clients sent it to me. It was so honest and you could tell it was coming from the heart. Yeah. So I sort of moved over to Ariel's side a little bit. But anyway, it keeps things interesting, I'm sure.
And I think Ariel does a good job. Bam, there's Bang with the transparency. He's open. Hey. He's on it. What's up, Duane?
How we doing, Mr. Dolce? I'm almost home. 5 minutes. Sorry.
Not a problem. You're looking good, bro. You're looking fresh.
Thank you, sir. I had to do your podcast, so I thought I'd get my hair cut, wear a nice shirt, maybe shave my beard.
Wow. Duane, I want to introduce you to Leo Rex. Leo, this is Duane Bang Ludwig, and this is Leo's show, Leo's network. He's done an amazing job building his channel. I'm happy to be co-hosting here, bringing the combat to Leo's airwaves. And who better than you, Duane Bang?
Awesome. Leo, thank you, sir. Good to meet you.
Duane, it's such an honor to have you on the show. I'm so glad that Mike connected us and brought you on.
Likewise. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Sorry, I'm driving right now. I'll be
take your time. You can call back in if you prefer, but whatever's easiest for you.
Well, if I got an opportunity to listen to you two men talk, I'd like to hear it.
Well, let's move on to the next subject other than the aerial thing. I wanted to ask you, Mike, tomorrow's the fight. What do you see happening in the Nick Diaz versus Lawler fight?
Oh, yeah.
Duane, what do you think, buddy? How do you break this down?
I love both of those fighters personally and as martial artists and what they bring to the cage outside as well. I remember watching that fight and thinking, oh, they're just trying to put up Robbie Lawler because Nick's first fight was Jeremy Jackson, and he got, if I remember correctly, taken down. There was an armbar to Jeremy Jackson from the bottom, and I didn't see any striking from Nick Diaz in his first fight. So I thought Robbie Lawler was brought in by the UFC to be built up, and they gave him Nick, who would be an easy fighter to beat because he's just a laid-back jiu-jitsu guy, and he'd be able to ground and pound him, if not stop him on stand-up. But Nick showed up with some hands, and I was surprised because I was unaware of that. And when he knocked out Robbie Lawler, I was impressed on many aspects. One, with his confidence in the cage, pushing the fight, taunting him, and able to get better hands and have that distance control and having two southpaws fighting. I was just blown away. But now I feel Robbie Lawler, for sure, is a 100% better fighter, not better than Nick, but a better version of himself. Yep. And Nick seems to be a lesser version only from his shadow boxing and his mental state, what he's been talking lately. He doesn't feel real confident. It doesn't seem like he's into the fight. So I'm going to have to say Robbie Lawler is going to win the fight just based off of Nick's interviews and the way he physically looks. And apparently with today's day and age, we're not supposed to be judging people, but I'm going to judge everybody because we're not at Planet Fitness. So did that answer the question?
What do you make of it, Mike?
Yeah, I agree with Duane in that Nick Diaz used to be a scary man because of his mentality. He just wanted to fight. He'll fight you in the hallway. He'll fight you in the elevator. It's like, I remember the days where the UFC would have to make sure Nick Diaz wasn't even in the building when his opponent was there because things could get crazy. We remember when Nick Diaz was there throwing a punch at Jason Mayhem Miller, I think was at Strikeforce or XC. Right? Nick was cornering a dude and gets into a fight with his opponent in the cage like a madman. But now mentally he's talking about, I don't even know why I'm here. I shouldn't even be doing this. Yeah. Which that's physicality, man. I've seen athletes change weight classes, look a little soft, and still be monsters. Like, I think Nick Diaz has 15 minutes in him. This isn't a 25-minute fight. Duane knows guys with 30, 40, 50 fights, they can fight 15 minutes coming off a bar stool. But mentally, does Nick want to be there? Robbie, he's coming off that knockout loss. We've seen that highlight 1,000 times, right? You see that highlight 1,000 times. If you're in the game for 20 years or so, you see that highlight all the time. Robbie probably doesn't want to see that highlight again. He wants to replace it. So mentally is where I think this bout is really going to be fought. And I agree with Duane. I think Robbie takes this one viciously, by the way.
But I haven't seen or heard anything of Robbie Lawler lately, but his fight that he brings to the cage is never questioned. I'm questioning Nick right now, which you are as well. Sorry. But the fight, we said the fight is mentally, mentally for everybody every day, right?
That's true.
And Nick doesn't seem to be too down. He doesn't seem the old version of himself wanting to scrap for any reason.
Yep.
Leo, what are your thoughts, sir?
Oh, I know too little about this. I haven't been so just to give a little bit of background, Duane. I'm just getting into combat sports in the last few months, thanks to Mike. My background is mostly in like nutrition, performance enhancing drug use, and stuff like that for combat sports. I mean, for not combat sports, but strength sports. So I was an arm wrestler personally. So so the good thing about this show is that we have Mike, and then we have me, who knows nothing about combat sports. So we get to ask people questions. So hopefully people can follow along and learn along the way and develop an admiration for this new hobby. You know.
Yes, sir. And I'll say one thing for the first fight with Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler. I remember watching the fight, and I don't remember who was commentating. Maybe it was Rogan at the time, and then he said that they heard leading coming up to this fight that Nick Diaz had some good hands, and as we've known now, if you've been following his career, he boxes quite a bit, and I'm pretty sure he's faced more southpaws at the time than Robbie Lawler did at that time. So a southpaw fighting an orthodox guy, that's typically, that's usually what you face when you're southpaw, because most people are orthodox. And then when you face another southpaw, it throws you off. But I'm pretty sure Nick had the heads up on that as far as educating the audience. Southpaw is when your right leg is forward, and most people are orthodox, meaning left leg forward. So most of the time when you spar and you do drills, your partner is going to be 95% of the time orthodox stance. But since most people are orthodox and Nick Diaz was southpaw, he's seen that open stance scenario. So open stance means when you're in opposite stances, and Nick faced that more often than I feel Robbie Lawler did when he was coming from Pat Militich's camp in Iowa. So this time now, again, Robbie Lawler is going to be more prepared for the close southpaw stance and have a better performance than the first fight. Did you see the first fight, Leo?
No, I haven't. I'm going to watch it actually to prepare tonight. I'm really excited to watch everything tomorrow. But I wanted to ask you guys this quickly so we could get a clip out before the fight tomorrow to get you guys' opinions. But can I ask you something? I've heard you, Duane, before mention that it's sometimes useful for like a southpaw fighter or a traditional fighter to learn to switch stances. Is that a common thing that fighters all learn how to do, or do a lot?
I'll say this: your odds of being successful in a combative scenario are going to be better if you can fight all degrees of angle of combat. So now,
Duane, we're having a little bit of a connection issue, buddy. Can you hear us?
Yeah, it's a little weak, Duane. It might be because of the phone internet. It's annoying because he's saying something so important.
I know.
And we can't hear it.
Just to be southpaw, but
Duane, we couldn't hear you.
All degrees of combat. I would say that. So,
Duane, can you hear me, buddy?
I will go inside the house.
Okay.
I just texted him also that the connection was jumping off.
In the meantime, Mike, can I ask you? Did you happen to see that?
Can you guys hear me better at all?
Not yet. Might happen once you connect to the Wi-Fi, Duane. But in the meantime, Mike, did you see the extravaganza last weekend with the arm wrestler versus the strongman in a boxing match? Hafthor Bjornsson versus Devon Larrat?
Yes.
Okay. What do you think about that? I mean, I'm very sorry. Let me apologize from the community of strength sports and arm wrestling in particular. I think maybe we have actually disgraced boxing slightly. So all these celebrity matches, everyone's like, you guys are disgracing boxing, and everyone's like, no, it's okay, it's good for boxing. This time, I think maybe we disgraced boxing a little bit.
I think Jake Paul. I think Jake Paul is elevating boxing, right? He's doing a good job. Hafthor and the gentleman he fought, man, I think that was a spectacle. Like Hafthor versus Eddie Hall, that's a grudge match. I'm happy to watch two unskilled guys fight each other down the road. But Duane, we're talking about the world's strongest man, Hafthor Bjornsson, the mountain from Game of Thrones, if you know that. He just fought an arm wrestler, and it was just right.
And what were the rules?
Boxing.
Okay. Huh.
Oh, but we were just chatting about that because you cut off. I want to ask you, Duane, how do you guys know each other? Mike told me you guys are old friends.
Yes, sir. For many years, I traveled up to Team Quest. Well, it was actually, I was before, I don't know if it was before Facebook or not, but I had my website, and I put on my website my daily routine of what I was doing for exercising to nutrition and everything. Just put a little blog out, I guess it would be considered back then. And Mike Dolce reached out to me and said that he's got some diet advice that would really help me. And he was at Team Quest. So I went up to Team Quest, and Sensei Bas Rutten had a connection there. So I went up there to train, met Mr. Dolce, and we've been together ever since. He's an awesome guy. I love Mr. Dolce. I wish I would have crossed paths with him earlier in my career. I would have had a better, I guess, shot at being successful with my combative athletics.
Wow, incredible. But by the way, Duane, your last name is so appropriate. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay, you know about it? Because
I found that out. I was like, okay, that fits. That's about right. But go ahead, sorry.
Oh, Mike, I was thinking, looking for names for my future son. And, in French, the word Louis is very common. And in Arabic, because I'm half Arab, by the way, Duane. So in the Arabic side, we have a name called Lu'ay, which means a little bull. And then Louis, I was like, what does Louis mean? So I researched it. Louis is the French version of Ludwig. And Ludwig is a man who was glorious in battle. And it's an ancient Germanic name, so it's a very cool name. The other thing we share in common, I was going to mention, Duane, is that you're from Colorado as well. I was also born in Boulder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is I moved around a lot, so I didn't spend a lot of time growing up in Colorado. But I wanted to ask you, because you grew up in Denver, or grew up, I believe you were born in Denver, right? And then you spent some time in California, where I currently live, and then moved back to Colorado, which I know was always one of your goals, to start your own gym there. How has Colorado changed since? Because you were born just a few years before me. How has it changed since the 90s and 80s, where Colorado was this idyllic, beautiful place on earth?
Well, it's still beautiful. There's just a lot more buildings, homes, and people here,
Okay, so
if you have equity, it's went up. So I guess that in that aspect, it's good if you set yourself properly. It's just it's a thriving economic state. For sure.
Yeah, because my wife and I have been thinking about moving back there, actually. Our original plan date was in the next 2 months, and we're very excited. But we keep hearing people say, like, oh, it's changed and it's like really dirty now, and there's like more like, crime or homeless, but not so much around Denver and Boulder, Westminster, that kind of area, right?
Yeah, we live in a good area. The more people that come, it's not like we get one mindset of people, all different walks of life are coming. So we are going to have more crime. It's just what comes with, if you have 10 people, I'm not quite sure what the odds are, but 1 of 10 people probably steal something. So if you have 20 people, you have 2 people stealing something, but you also have more good people as well, right? More intellectuals and people that are doing good as well. So just like, I think the 3 of us, we're on the good side of change. So the more of us that we can have on the world, and the more of us that can share the message, the better off we'll be. So we can have some more crime here, but let those criminals come to my dojo. They're going to become a better version of themselves. And along that journey, maybe they'll learn more about the sports and nutrition as well from Mr. Dolce. So it'll be a win-win.
Oh, wow. You just touched on a really important one question I want to ask you, sir. So people who are trained fighters, especially professional fighters, do they tend to have like controlled tempers and not get into physical altercations? And in the sense that, could it be a good training for delinquent teenagers? Like
sure,
to control
100%,
themselves?
Allowing them to have a better understanding of themselves mentally, spiritually, and physically, and be able to direct that energy in the positive area or in the correct area. Yeah. So we might actually make better criminals. It just depends on how you actually utilize the skills that are going to be developed, right? So I'm not exactly sure what you're going to use with those skills. Some people like TJ Dillashaw is going to use it to win back his UFC title. Some people are using it to lose weight and become just have a stress relief as well. Some people might learn those skills to go beat somebody up. Who knows? But hopefully that message they won't hear that message in my school. I'll say that.
Duane, how did Colorado become such a hot spot for MMA? Like in the 80s?
Yeah, it always has been, right? The first UFCs were here. The first couple of UFCs were here because there was no athletic commission, for one. So there was nobody here to tell the UFC no. And it was a beautiful state, and they had a big arena, McNichols at the time. So that worked out really well, I'm assuming, for them. But yeah, it's always been a hot spot for athletics in general. I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm happy for it. There wasn't much martial arts here when I was growing up. We had some solid martial art practitioners here, though, and they're still here, which is a Contra Ninomiya, who's a solid traditional karate black belt from Japan. And he was my first instructor. And I think I was able to get off on a good start with his guidance. I've been lucky enough to have solid world-class martial art instructors build me up. Trevor Wittman, Bas Rutten, Clarence Thatch, Sensei Ninomiya, James Tigert. So I've been lucky. And I'm not quite sure why they've been able to come to Colorado, but I've been able to learn from them. And now carry it on. I mean, that's the definition of sensei, history teacher from those who've come before you. So taking the positive lessons from the past and articulating them back into your own version, but carrying them into the future. And Colorado is a hot spot, but I'm not sure why.
I would say the proximity of the Olympic Training Center is right up there in Colorado Springs. Wow. So I think that's
60 miles south. Yes, sir.
So
that helps.
It's like Mecca in a way for elite athletes. And I think these athletes come up there, their coaches come up there, they realize this is beautiful, pristine land, and maybe they settle there. Plus it's elevation.
Yeah, I was going to ask the elevation.
So I think, and it's a beautiful.
What do you think about the elevation stuff?
What's that?
What do you think about the elevation, Mr. Dolce? What do you think about the elevation training here and then sleeping here? So I've heard TJ, I'm pretty sure what TJ's beliefs is to train at elevation, but to rest and recover at sea level.
Well, that's
is that right?
Is train high, live high, train low. So I think it's flipped what TJ's saying. You want to live high, get your body acclimated to train to breathing low oxygen, right? So your body produces more red blood cells, but then train at sea level where you have access to greater amounts of red blood cells with greater oxygen available. So, live high, train low. But if you're living high and training high over an extended period of time, you're going to acclimate just fine. So when you do come back to sea level, you're up, right? So however that metric may be, depending on the sport, you compete at a higher level. But more so, if you live at sea level and compete at high level, it takes time. Look at Cain Velasquez when he went out there and
Mexico.
So, and I know, Leo, you probably have some comments on this on the biochem side.
Well, I was just curious. Maybe it's the fact that when you go to sea level, there's less the osmotic pressure, and the pressure on your body is lower, which causes less inflammation, which may help you recover faster. That's the only thought that would I think explain that a little bit. But real quick, Duane, what are the top fight gyms and what are the top fight gyms now in Colorado? I know about Elevation. Is there a few others that are very well known? And then what are the top? Because I know you don't have a fight gym. Yeah, I was going to say also the top MMA academies.
I have a dojo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say there's 2 here in Colorado, and it would depend on your weight class. If you are a 170 pounder or above, the best place to go, in my opinion, would be Elevation Fight Team. If you're 155 or below, your better bodies, more people are going to have to work with, would be Factory X. Now that's assuming that the better way to prepare for a fight is in a group setting with a bunch of other athletes versus like what Stipe does and what TJ Dillashaw does and what other people, Demetrius Johnson does, is train with a select few coaches and then test those skills in the broader room. So it's more honed instruction and then applied within the broader spectrum of rooms. So it just depends on which area of development you choose to take when you extract your skill. Is it in group setting with everybody, or is it a couple people with a few coaches dedicated on you, and then you apply that to your setting? So, but for the groups and the bodies for work, and because the best coach, and not just because he's here in Colorado, but in the world, is Trevor Wittman. Trevor Wittman's the best coach, and he happens to be here. But what he does with Gaethje and Rose and Usman is he trains them one-on-one, which I feel is the best way to share and translate information. And then when it comes time to apply that for sparring, then they go to Elevation, which I feel is the proper path. But not that everyone that comes to Colorado can work with Trevor, because you can't. He's busy and he works with a select few. But hopefully I answered your question. Sorry,
you did absolutely
around quite a bit, but it's not always an easy black white answer.
No, my mind's like yours. I jump around also, so we're completely on the same page. Plus, I heard you mention
because there's just so many bits of information.
Exactly, and I heard you mention Trevor many times, so it's good to get a better idea of him. Can I ask you something? So when
he's awesome.
You started with striking sports early, and you got into Muay Thai at 15. I've heard you mention in many interviews that you were always determined to be a champion. I want to ask you some advice for younger listeners that may be training themselves in their teenage years. How do you realize if you have potential? And the question is this, right? I want to ask you something, because we come from a strength sport perspective. And in strength sports, there is a genetic limiting factor. No matter how obsessed you are and how much you love it, you might become a great coach, but you couldn't, maybe there'll be limitations. In martial arts and combat sports, the genetic limitations because you talk about obsession also as a driving factor in your life and what made you great. Can someone overcome their genetic limitations with obsession? And if not, how can they realize when they're young whether they have the potential to be a great fighter?
So that's interesting because it depends on the individual, what he brings to the table. There's in the book of Proverbs, in the King James Version 22:6, he says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he gets old, he won't depart from it. So that's assuming the instructor knows which way the child should go. The Hebrew version of that quote is, train up a child according to his ways, and when he gets old, he won't depart from it. And I like that one better because that's teaching the instructor to adapt to the athlete. But I also think it's a combination of both, is to adapt to the athlete and extract their potential. And along that journey, share with him or her some of your past experiences, right? So it's a combination of both. So now if an individual has, would you say, a limitation, then what is he good at? Let's focus this double down on what he's good at, rather than spending an hour on what you're not good at, which you should still work on things that you're not good at, but not to neglect what you're already good at. It's one of the things I ask my guys doing sparring and what I'm doing when I'm watching a fight. What are they doing good? Do more of that. What do you need to work on? Do that. Just two simple things. If the guy is fighting and he's getting hit with low kicks, block the freaking low kicks, defend the low kicks. Well, you have a good right hand. How about block the low kick and intercept with the cross? So it's a way to tie both things together. So there are limiting factors per individual. Not everyone's going to be fluid and smooth like TJ Dillashaw with the killer instinct, but that's the coach's job to point out the good attributes of the athlete and hone and extract those. But belief does push through barriers. So not to neglect that either.
You just brought up a really important point. So it seems like generally the strategy is to focus on strengths, not on weaknesses. Not on repairing weaknesses, but
I would say that,
strengths.
right? God gave us gifts. Let's hone and control them.
And do the natural gifts for strikers differ from the natural gifts for grapplers, such that usually you'll find
because of the dynamic, for sure.
Physical dynamic.
Some people like, you wouldn't expect Anderson Silva to be a grinding wrestler, right? He's more of a fluid, smooth striker. Then you have people like TJ who do both. And then you have people who like Khabib, who's not a fluid striker, but he's an amazing grappler. So if I was to train, Khabib and I was just telling him, don't grapple, just do boxing and kickboxing, then that would be a waste. He wouldn't have become the best version of himself, which is the naturally grappling version that he is. So double down on what you're good at is what I always say, right? And that's just the life advice in general, no matter what the category is.
Yeah, you spent the early part of your career in kickboxing before you went into the UFC and more MMA stuff. I want to ask you a little bit about kickboxing because I know very little about it. I noticed you competed in several federations, including you achieved, of course, the world champion title in a Thai federation. How do the different federations differ in terms of the kickboxing that they have? Like, are there different rules?
Yeah, there's different rules, weight classes, and just they have sanctioning bodies. So there's boxing, and then there's kickboxing with no knees. Then there's kickboxing where the kicks have to be above the waist. Then there's modified Muay Thai. There's Muay Thai with no elbows, like K1 rules. So there's all these different rule sets. And then categories in between, and then sanctioning bodies. So IKF, ISKA, WKA. So there's just a lot of governing bodies. So you would become a champion of a sanctioning body rather than how MMA is now, where you become the champion of an organization, which I like that route better. But yeah, I just jumped around, took all the fights I could get just to stay busy, because there weren't shows at the time that were signing fighters and saying, okay, we have 12 events this year, we're going to keep you busy X amount of shows. It was just always hit or miss, just because the market wasn't as strong to create a solid schedule of events. When you could.
Has the growing popularity of the UFC sort of put a shadow on kickboxing around the world in terms of its popularity as a competitive sport?
It should enhance it. Most fights start standing. You have to.
Yeah, I know, but young people, don't they prefer the glory of UFC MMA stuff versus like being an elite kickboxer?
Probably. But I think one way to get there is to do some kickboxing fights, kickboxing training. If you are looking to compete to fight in the UFC, then you can do just MMA fights, which isn't a bad idea either, but it's also not a bad idea to do some wrestling matches, jiu-jitsu matches, kickboxing matches, and so on, and just to get a good understanding of that individual area to find out what you like, which goes back to your question of far as do we train ortho or southpaw? Well, you're going to like certain offense and defensive techniques in one stance versus the other. So you won't know that unless you explore that option anyway. So it's all trial and error, right? Just discovering different layers of life.
What happened to the Dutch and French kickboxing styles that were so popular in the 90s? I mean, I saw a lot of the people you were facing were Dutch fighters, were trained there. Is that still alive, that Dutch tradition, or the French tradition?
I think so, but MMA is just so popular now. I think people want the truth, and not that kickboxing and boxing is not the truth, but I think people are just more open to seeing mixed martial arts. And, if it was a kickboxing fight, I'm assuming the audience might be saying, well, we're missing out. There could be some ground and pound here. There could be a takedown. I don't like this because of that, who knows? But I would like to see a thriving market on every category, but it's just how the world turns. Things change, right?
Now, you coming from a background as a like a eclectic martial artist and then a competitive kickboxer, then you entered the UFC in its early stages. You watched the UFC's evolution, or let's say more specifically, MMA's evolution in terms of fighting style. Can you explain to me why initially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was so effective even without striking? And then the next step I want to ask you also in the themes was wrestling and boxing. How did that combination become so effective next?
Well, if you can do something really good that the other partner isn't good at, then there it is, right? And most fights end up on the ground. So you have to be competitive on the ground to be able to control that scenario. If you don't want to end up on the ground, learn how to wrestle and box. So just the evolution of mindsets, right? It just said that's the antidote. That's the kryptonite to jiu-jitsu. Is being able to wrestle anti-jiu-jitsu, because you have to get a hold of somebody, right? You have to fill that space, and that's where all the connections, that's where all the knockouts happen. Is that initial contact, that bringing together of the forces, and be able to time that entry. Either you initiate or you let them come to you. Like Conor McGregor's really good at pulling them in, pissing them off, pulling them in, and countering them. Controlling that dead space is very important. But once you get past the dead space, you have to be able to wrestle and then grapple. That's why I put together my mixed martial arts curriculum. It is layered out, and I have belts and layers of things because there's layers to life. You get a permit before you get a driver's license. You got to learn how to crawl, stand, walk before you can run. There's layers to life. So I've been able to, I think, dissect martial arts pretty well to grab somebody and teach them their balance and their coordination, and then the basic skill sets of striking and footwork. And then that leads into the grappling, or to the wrestling, to the grappling, and so on. So being fluent in all areas is obviously going to help someone's situation. And that's just how people were able to fight against jiu-jitsu, was learning that the wrestling will mitigate the jiu-jitsu, but you better learn how to strike now as well. And it's nice to see that most people in the UFC are no longer one-dimensional. They're very well versed. And the people that are one-dimensional, more so like Conor McGregor, his ground game just seems to be really lacking. Sorry to keep bringing him up even though he's not fighting. He's been taking a back seat now. And that's one thing too with Robbie Lawler and Nick Diaz fight. We've seen Robbie Lawler evolve drastically in all the areas, and we haven't seen that from Nick. So sorry to bring this back and jump around, but it's just, it all intertwines together.
But Duane, was there an advantage of the punching style in boxing versus Muay Thai punching? Which I know Muay Thai punching, we found out from John Wayne Parr, we were talking to last week. He was saying in Muay Thai, traditional Muay Thai, they don't score the punch that much. So they don't really focus on punches. Do you think that's why boxing was so, as opposed to Thai boxing?
I think, the rule set will dictate what an athlete does as well. Right. So if they're not scoring the punch, there's a promoter here in Colorado, a good friend of mine, Oscar Martinez, and he follows more so the traditional Thai route. And he has fights here in Colorado. And I think if I remember correctly, if you land a kick, that counts to someone landing 8 punches. So it's literally 8-to-1 ratio. So you can go land 2 kicks and win the fight. And then that guy landed 15 punches. So to me, that's nonsense. I don't think that's right. And that's steering away from the boxing and making it more basically not kickboxing fight, but a kicking fight, which is why the traditional Thai fights are so much more kicks, because they're not counting the hands. But like John Wayne Parr brought hands into the Thai boxing and was very successful because of that. So if there's somebody lacking in a certain area and that's your strength, then you might as well apply to your strengths.
Was the advancement of the clinch in MMA, did it come from the wrestling or the boxing side initially? And then was it advanced with Muay Thai?
It came from the evolution of controlling that dead space and not wanting to be taken down or to take people down. So it's just trying to have the upper hand, right? And it's original karate in Okinawa was MMA. There was strikes, there was ground fighting, it was everything. And then when it got brought to mainland Japan, Tokyo, it got dissected and broken up so they could learn certain areas and became less, I guess you would say, offensive. Now it's brought back around, unless you want to go even earlier to, was it 450 BC, where the Greeks were having the bare knuckle fights. Not even bare knuckle, they were wearing steel plates across their wrists. Have you ever seen the bronze statue, the boxer at rest? Yeah. That thing is awesome. So anyway, original fighting was MMA. And then we dissected it for whatever reason. Now we're back to being the truth. What really works in a combative scenario. And we've come to find out that it's the wrestler that can box and have top position.
Yeah, what Duane is talking about is so interesting, Mike. I don't know if you've heard about this, but apparently karate was brought in from Okinawa to mainland Japan for sort of like nationalistic purpose, to like inflate the country's achievements, because the Okinawans are a different kind of people than the mainland Japanese people. Their ethnicity starts with a Y, but anyway, so they brought it into mainland and got rid of a lot of the grappling techniques and made it much more formalized, right? I didn't know that. It's very interesting. I wanted to ask you, what about no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? How have you seen that influence? Because I've heard you mention it before in interviews. How has it changed the martial art game?
It's made it faster, and it's made it, just a grappling match with the gi is a slower pace just because there's more friction. No-gi, even though they're on the rash guard, it's very slick and it's just a faster paced interaction. And most people don't wear a jacket when they're on the street or when they fight. Like, they'll take the jacket off or whatever, right? So nothing against gi jiu-jitsu. I think it's beautiful. And jiu-jitsu itself is one of the purest arts out there. If you're to dissect them and just create an actual ground fighting art, is the art where you can practice 100% all the time and you shouldn't be getting hurt. But you can't do that in boxing or kickboxing or any striking arts because of the injuries. So anyway, because of the truth factor of jiu-jitsu is what I really like. I think it's the strongest art, just because you can practice it full bore all the time, hopefully without injury. But gi and no gi, it's just basically it's almost two different arts, right?
Do you think that
it's what happens, it's what's needed in mixed martial arts?
So like, if somebody was training for a mixed martial art competition, would he even, and he was a young man, say he was 16 years old, would he even waste his time with gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu if he wanted to be efficient? Or would he just go to
When is his fight? When is he looking to fight?
Like at 23, like 7 years later. I would say
wear the gi, because the gi slows you down and it does require proper technique. So now because you're not going to be able to be as fast, I'm going to pop out of things and have the sweat factor. You're going to have to learn the actual step-by-step technique in order to be successful. So I think I know gi is recommended. My children don't have to compete, but they do have to train. And one day a week they train with the gi. And that's why, so they can slow it down and understand what they're actually doing. When I was training mixed martial arts, I was already a striker. So most of my coaching was to defend the jiu-jitsu, anti-jiu-jitsu, right? And that's like saying someone, let's teach you just to defend strikes all the time. Like, you're not throwing back. So if I could go back and redo things, I would have been the wrestler. I would have been the jiu-jitsu practitioner. I wouldn't have just been sprawling and brawling. I would have understood exactly what's going on with the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu, rather than trying to be secondary and always escape and defend things, So if that 16-year-old that wants to compete at 23, wear the gi. That's coming from me. That even rhymed a little bit.
That's awesome, Duane, because Mike and I always talk about this. We're always wondering because I have a newborn daughter. She's just a couple months old, and Mike has children, of course. And we're always thinking about when should you start training, putting them in combat sports. I've heard you talk about it before, and I know you don't want your children necessarily to compete unless they want to, but you want them to be able to defend themselves. I was curious. Yeah. Obviously, you have the gym yourself, so you have all the resources. But say you were a guy like me that didn't have the resources, but was willing to take your kids 4 days a week to a different place. Would you take them to? You mentioned wrestling. That's what I was going to ask. Would you take them ever to a wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu separately, or is it not worth the time, you think?
I think that has its benefits to wrestle separately and to do Jiu-Jitsu separately. It's like if you're teaching kickboxing, today we're going to work the jab, but we still have the cross and hooks and the uppercuts, overhands, and the knees and the front kicks. You have all these other aspects. You can't have this toe hit the door. You have all these other aspects. So in order for them to focus on one area, then yes.
Interesting. Tell me about Bas Rutten. How did he change your life? I know Bas and Trevor were your most major influences in developing your system.
Bas saw something in me that I didn't see. He believed in me when I didn't believe in me. And that allowed me to become the man that I needed to be today. So I wouldn't be who I am now without his belief in me. Because, you know, that's why we have coaches and we have mentors and we have people above us to hopefully believe in their expertise. And he believed in something in me that I was like, I knew I was going to be a world champion anyway when I was a kid. But once I seen a legitimate world champion also have that belief in me, made me even stronger. So, and then there's a million other things though, because the way his brain works as far as setups and combinations and drills and understanding and learning, he's a realist. I'm a lot of who I am today is because of Sensei Rutten, for sure.
You mentioned something very interesting in an interview once. You said like, I don't understand how this works, but you were saying like there are drills, not sparring drills, but bag drills where there'll be a combination. And you said that Bas would sort of like combine the combinations. So instead of it being a 1, 2, 3, the whole thing becomes a 1. So this is like...
He simplified it. He simplified it. Yeah, because, you know, in the traditional boxing world, 3 is the lead hook. But in Bas's number system, 3 is jab cross hook. So he's been able to really condense and bring things into an easier understanding for it to actually flow and grow.
You know what's fascinating about that is that in cognitive psychology, we call the process of combining mental processes together as you develop expertise, we call it chunking. You chunk the processes together.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's sort of chunking the moves. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So how are these fight clubs, like for example, the Team Alpha Male and so on, how do fight clubs get reimbursed for the efforts that they put into their fighters? And are they possessive over their fighters? What's it like working over there? Because I know you were a phenomenal coach at Team Alpha Male in Sacramento before you moved over. And I don't know much about these different fight clubs. Are they possessive over their fighters? How do they get returns from their fighters?
It depends, you know, on their business model and how they set things up. And, you know, you do become more attached to something the more that you put into something, right? Because the more you put into something and then they grow, then you actually become closer together. So I understand sometimes why people are, what would you say, clingy or want to keep what they've built, because that's just how it is. If that's the mindset to grow a long-term relationship, then yes, but to have the mindset that people's lives change and your one-stop shop isn't the only place in town. And for the people that learn and grow, they do need to venture out. So if it's for the overall development of the individual, then they shouldn't have to just stay right there. They should be able to travel and train to get different perspectives. That's the beauty of the internet. We have access to everything now, but not everything comes through as clear on a video as it does in person. But how does a school get reimbursed? I guess it depends on how they set up their things, you know, what they're charging, if they're charging for them to train there. And then are they getting that back when they win their fight, taking a percentage, or however they structure that deal? There's many ways to work numbers, you know? So,
so they get percentages of like purses and stuff like that?
Yes. So what was it? Well, like, I'll tell you what I do at TJ. So I'm not sure what they do now, but what I do at TJ is I don't train him to charge. But when he has his fight and I train him for his fight and we travel and we do what we do our thing, he pays me 10% of his public pay. So that's how I structure my deal with him. I'm pretty straightforward, black and white, and that's what I do. So all our private sessions, and if he comes to train for a week and then goes back to California, or if I end up going out there and help him, I don't charge him separately for that. I'll financially get paid once he wins his fight, and then to get 10% from the actual fight of public pay. But it just depends on how people structure their business plan.
You've mentioned
what I do regardless. I don't do it for the money. You know, it's people over profit. So it's for the passion of things. But, you know, a ninja's got a mortgage, so we got to meet something in the middle, right?
Hey, what does this ninja thing mean? I always hear you mention ninjas. What does that mean?
That's my brother. Like, that's, you know, that's my, I guess in the hip hop world, it'd be my dog.
Oh, right?
My friend, my acquaintance. You know,
That was really funny. But I love that principles over profit. That's a great perspective. Can I ask you something? Because very rarely have we talked to fighters that not only are world-renowned coaches that have really made a difference in fighters' performance, but
there's not many of us.
No, I don't think there are any, but actually love what they're doing. That's the most distinguishing feature that I noticed. But I've heard you say in an interview before that the thing you're best at doing is coaching MMA fighters, but it's not the thing that you love the most. What is it that you love the most, and how do you balance doing what you love and what you're very good at?
Well, I love teaching martial arts. That's what I love the most. I love helping people become a better version of themselves through the vehicle of martial arts. You know, teaching them to be on time with a proper uniform and bound on that and lining up, and teaching them discipline and controlling themselves from the inside out. And that becomes expressed the better they do at martial arts. So it's the internal beliefs that get them to actually become a better version. But what I understand the best and what is the most rewarding is seeing somebody operate at their full potential of martial arts. And how do you test that against another trained ninja, another trained individual? So that's what I do best. That is a roller coaster of a ride and isn't as stable as I would like for it to be for financial security for my family and I. So the short-term goals are some of those fights, but the long-term goal is to teach overall martial arts to help the people that don't want to fight in the cage. There's still a lot of people underneath them, not that they're above the other people, but there's all the other people who want to have different goals. I want to help everybody become a better version of themselves because that's why I'm here on this earth. And that's God's gift to me, is helping people. I accept everybody for who they are when they show up, but I expect you to do better. I accept you, but I expect you to do better. And that's what people like. I'm going to give them the honest answer. It's okay who you are, but it's not okay to be that same person tomorrow. You should improve. There's more to you. Now, I don't want to hear no bullshit excuses, motherfucker. Like, show up on time and put in work. That's how you get better. And sometimes not working harder, sometimes it's going slower. So what I'd love to do is just help people become better versions of themselves.
I have never heard that before. That was an excellent statement when you said it's okay to be you, but don't come back here tomorrow like that. That's
the same person. Yeah. Improve, right? Yeah. That's just a different perspective, right? Psychologically.
Really, really.
And every time I tell somebody that, I'm telling myself too. So it's just reminders, right? Every video I post and every photo I post and the things I say, I'm talking to myself. I expect a better version of myself.
So what distinguishes Bang's, because just for those that don't know, your martial arts academy is called Bang Muay Thai, named after yourself. What distinguishes because I've heard that you're like, the footwork is very unusual. There's a lot of unusual things that you guys train there. What do you think you're most distinguished by among the Muay Thai gyms?
Giving students the red pill, allowing them to be free.
Interesting.
You know, I have a set system. People need to know these drills and combinations, but within those drills and combinations, you're going to find yourself. And that's why, there's a gym, there's an academy, and there's a dojo. A gym you're going to work out in, an academy you're going to learn some stuff. But while you're working out and learning, it'll turn into a dojo because you're going to find your own way. So my school is one of three or all three, depending on you. So that's what it is, right? So again, it goes back to hopefully evolving and accepting more responsibility.
How did you transform TJ Dillashaw's career?
I told him it's okay. I told him it's okay. I didn't tell them. I don't tell people what not to do. I tell them what to do. I see something good and I tell them to do more of that. I'm good at registering. I'm good at judging people and seeing what they're good at, what their talents are, the natural tendencies. I think a lot of instructors in schools teach from a book, or maybe they don't truly understand. And I know that I follow that Hebrew proverb, train up a child according to his ways. I was doing that before I came across that quote. And it's not that I do that consciously. I just subconsciously do that. I just feel I'm not trying to produce Duane Ludwigs. I'm trying to produce the best version of themselves. So TJ became TJ because of his athletic ability that he was born with, his work ethic that he was born with, and also that his parents instilled with him when they put him into wrestling to work hard and to go and to tell him that there's more to him, and for him to do 5 push-ups, not okay. He needs to do 10, to push him past that, because we'll all cut ourselves short unless we're not told from the outside to go a little bit harder. And that's something that Mike Dolce has done for me. He's helped push me and keep me in line and disciplined. There's things Mike's done for me that helped me outside the school and, business wise and with the family. He's presented me with a lot of books and information that helped me become a better human being.
That's fascinating.
Thank you very much, Duane.
That's fascinating.
Thank you, Mr. Dolce. You've helped change the life for my family and I, and everyone that I talk to. I spread your gospel and your love. So we're all on the good side of change.
Amen, brother.
Duane, do the top athletes, the ones that maybe really have a shot at being champions, do they usually respond well to this kind of strict? I mean, you're known for your style, which is honest and tough. But the question is this: so we've been asking people every few weeks, because some people will say their coach was very harsh on them, but they wouldn't want to be that way to their students. But my feeling is, I have a suspicion in the back of my mind that people who are that determined respond well to that kind of criticism. Yeah. Do you find that to be the case? A champion.
They know it's not easy, but that goes back to adapting to the athlete. Like TJ Dillashaw, he responds better to positive advice. Hands up, chin down, move your head, footwork, stay outside, pull them in, time the step. When I was training Danny Castillo, he performed better under negative advice. Hands up, motherfucker, quit being a little bitch, get in there and fight. So there's just different motivation keys per individual.
How do you plan a strategy for a fight? I mean, I know obviously we can't go into too much detail, but what's your process like?
No, it's all good.
From the top down, like how?
If TJ is good at 10 things, and 4 of those 10 things are going to work against this opponent, we're doing those 4 things. But your opponent's good at these couple things. Let's be aware of those. Boom.
Okay. And so you prepare those
things
drills
that I point out, I can see and I understand things, I think, at a pretty deep level.
So is it tactical when you plan with a fighter? So you're describing, for example, this fighter is going to do these several things. We do these things. So we have to have a defense against what he's doing. That's tactical, right? But do you then have a strategy across the match?
That's assuming that you're letting the fighter do his thing, which sometimes you don't let your fighter do his thing.
So during the match, you're actually dictating? Or not
3
dictating,
months,
but
3 months before, during, and after, right? Implement your game plan. So it just depends on what those things are that they're good at versus what we're good at. People think I'm a good coach. I'm a great coach, whatever. I just do what I see. Like I see things and it just makes sense to do it certain ways. Right. So I just have, some people have an artistic eye. Some people are just better at certain things than others in registering things. I think I can see harmony and sequences during, like, when people move, the kinetic energy. I can read that out pretty well. So there's not one set answer other than if you're good at something, do that.
Is coaching a lightweight different than a heavyweight because of the knockout power in the heavyweights?
Same rules apply. Rules apply. If the lightweight has a good overhand and the heavyweight does, then I'm gonna tell them both to execute their overhands. But because the heavyweight hits hard and you might get knocked out, maybe we change our stance to southpaw or orthodox, or it depends on the scenario, to mitigate the risk and enhance our abilities.
Can you explain to me? So Mike and I were just talking about this before you came on. So I've noticed something. When I gained strength sometimes during my life, I wasn't training as a combat athlete. So I wasn't punching bags or anything. Without punching bags, but getting stronger, my punches would get slower and look ridiculous. Like I'd be like moving like a sumo wrestler, slowly doing like these round punches. Where I imagine that if somebody was strength training and also hitting the bag, he wouldn't get that slowing down and weird movement pattern. So I want to ask you, how valuable is strength training for an MMA athlete? Does it actively add to striking power, and does it slow down or change agility? And is there a way around that?
I think there's a way around it. It's, I have a student at my dojo now. His name is George. He looks to be a bodybuilder. I'm not sure if he's actually a bodybuilder, but he looks like it. And he's pretty stiff and robotic, but he's starting to loosen up and have more of a fluid state. But some people are more efficient being tense and protected, so it just depends on what they're good at. And again, meeting them at their level and building them up. But I would like to see someone build more strength, which should translate into harder punching, assuming they have correct technique, timing, and distance and understanding. So there's other attributes to take into consideration, which would develop proper or more power in a punch. But if they're going to get stronger, they shouldn't get tenser. They should keep that same fluid state. Would be nice.
When you get a new guy at the gym who hits a bag with unusual power, do you go up to them and say, hey, you have a gift, you might be talented at this? I mean, is that one of the defining features of talent?
Yeah, I always tell people what they're good at. I point out because maybe they don't see it, just they're going to see how awesome I was. But since Rutten told me I was, so I believed. Some people don't. And how often are you getting actual good feedback from people outside? That's honest and real. Like when I give people advice, it's honest, it's real, and it's as pure as it can be. I'm like, this is what the fuck I do all day, every day, is I understand martial arts. I've dedicated my life to understanding martial arts and registering how a body should move to produce energy. So when I give the advice, it's honest and it's pure. So I will tell people if they are good at something, I will point that out.
How do you guys design like diets and supplement protocols, nutrition? Not talking about weight cuts, just generally for the fighters, or do you work with people like Mike to design them separately?
I sent everybody to Mr. Dolce. I'm good at what I'm good at. He's good at. Yeah.
And so, Mike, do you also work on the weight cuts?
We do. So our team, we have a team of registered dietitians who work as a part of the company, exercise physiologists on staff. We're pretty robust in what we do behind the scenes. I call it a think tank is what we have over here. And we work with a wide variety of personal private clients. We have high-level corporate CEOs similar to yourself, Leo. We work with Hollywood actors, actresses, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL players, Premier League soccer. Also, we're known because of the combat sports. That's really where we made our mark. We created that niche. We originated that niche, I could actually say, and grew. But now I just want to help humans achieve their goals while staying healthy. My job is to keep you healthy. What's your goal? You want to win a bodybuilding competition, UFC world title if you're competing there. You want to be able to walk your daughter down the aisle after recovering from a quadruple bypass. And honestly, the health side, we've never really got into this. Maybe Leo on the first podcast we did. Well, that's my passion. Health, longevity. I'm a longevity advocate. I'm not a performance scientist per se, but the performance matters. And this comes from my own childhood. I know when we focus on longevity, short term is easy. The healthier you are, the more you can do athletically. So when Duane, sends his clients, his athletes, his students over to us, we ensure that they are the healthiest possible version of themselves. So when they walk in to see Professor Ludwig, he can get the absolute best out of them athletically, performance-wise, everywhere. So we eliminate that burden, the health burden. But we work with everyone, and mostly it's I point the average person to our free content, which we produce, and then we have a digital platform, which is 4-week, 12-week personalized, truly personalized meal plans created by myself, our team of dietitians, but it has that interactive interface. And then we have more of the one-on-one white glove service, a la carte relationship with myself, but also with the registered dietitians. And that's what we love most. Because I love helping humans eliminate the fear and the anxiety of poor lifestyle patterns. We can eliminate that. We can get them back to seeing health again, where they can reclaim their energy. They feel better in their own skin. They start those small little victories. And then if you want to run a marathon or do a powerlifting meet, man, high five to you. I don't care. Good, go. Like I'll never compete most likely for a trophy again, but every single day I wake up, there's a competition ahead of me. Can I live this day better than the day last? Can I athletically be more? It doesn't matter what I deadlift. There's no crowd here alone in my private facility, but you better believe I'm going to be pushing. And that's really what I want to push forward. And I think that's why Duane and I were so unified in our approach to the world. We don't do this. Lord knows when Duane and I got started, there was no money doing what we were doing. We were not doing this for the money. We were doing this for the love and for the pursuit. And then his talent and skill. And Duane is changing people's lives every single day. It just so happens to create world champions as a result of changing lives, but thousands, tens of thousands of lives he's changing every single year through his wide variety of products and services and programs and speaking engagements. It's pretty amazing. And I think that's what it is. So truly living that martial arts lifestyle. And the last thing I'll say is here, I really, because of my background, I have compared what we do with the Dolce diet to the martial arts, the similarities, the pureness of principle, the universal principles. It's the constant, it's the mastery of oneself. I just use nutrition as the skill set, where Duane is using more of the combat, techniques, inside the dojo. But that uniformity, I think that synergy fits extremely well.
Yeah, Mike, I don't think that people can reach true excellence and flourish really if they are driven by the final aim, the monetary aim. And not only if it's monetary, also the achievement. You have to love the process of whatever you're doing to be excellent at what you're doing, right? Always. But so what I wanted to ask you quickly then, Mike, how many calories do these like 5'10", 175, 70-pound guys usually consume in the off season? And do they ever reach problems of insulin resistance, or they're just so aerobically taxed that insulin resistance is not an issue, not a concern? So you're doing high carbohydrates, 300 grams of protein, something like that?
Well, there's two different schools of thought. One is what everyone else does, which is wrong, and then the other is what we do, which is correct. Unfortunately, where we feed our athletes a robust variety of foods. We focus on healthful whole foods, high net nutrient foods. We want a wide variety, a wide influx of the micronutrients and the phytochemicals into the athlete, because the macros don't matter if the micros aren't there. If I deliver lumber to the job site, but there's no nails and no screws, what does it matter anyway? So Leo, the micros.
Yeah, of course. Just for the audience to know, one of Mike's distinguishing features in his diets is, first of all, focus on health and the health value of the foods, because you can get carbohydrates from a variety of sources. The other one is the micronutrients, and Mike and I both share this passion. So we're just saying this for the bodybuilders listening that are thinking we're talking about plain white rice and broccoli and chicken.
And this is why for a while, I was very critical of guys like Greg Doucette and many others, where they point their clients to the synthetic toxic chemicals, the highly processed foods. And then
he calls it, they call it dense foods. That's the exact opposite of what that food is. It's not dense, for God's sake. Oh, I'm sorry. This is an aggravating subject to me.
Drives me nuts.
Dense with crap.
They have these platforms and they are literally walking their clients, their community, to a dead end, off the cliff, when they can, maybe their calorie targets and macros are, that's fine. Okay, calorie count, macro target, that's fine. But if it is devoid of the micronutrition, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Manifesting disease, chronic inflammation, a disrupted digestive environment, and all of which has a negative effect. So what is the athlete? So 5'10", 170-pound off-season athlete on my program, on the Dolce diet, they're probably going to be eating somewhere, 3,200 calories, 3,500 calories if they're training optimally. And then we want them lean. I want my off-season athletes lean. We say you're an athlete 52 weeks out of the year. And this is where I push back against a lot of the MMA guys and gals. They go into an 8-week training camp. We call it fat camp, because they got to lose all their weight over 8 weeks. And then they go and they compete, and then they blow up, they balloon up. They eat like shit. They party their ass off. They abuse their body like bodybuilders. They abuse their body for 16 weeks. And then they diet their ass off and hate their life for 8 weeks, instead of living a very normalized 52-week pattern. We work with a lot of Olympic athletes, so I'm always thinking 4-year cycles. We have 4 years till the next big event. We have we have multiple goals, so we break that down: 4-year cycle, 12-month cycle, 3-month cycle, 3-week cycle, 1-week cycle. Now it's today. What do I have to do today? And I always see, so when my clients are walking around, I put a 32-hour bubble around them. What did we just do? What do we need to do in order to fill this bubble with all the micros and phytos that need to be consumed? Because we can't quite consume it all today, but over a 32-hour period, maybe 72-hour period, we can. Day and a half before, day and a half after, we can get that bubble a little bit bigger and squeeze it in. So if you're consuming the highest net nutrient foods, the total calories can come way down, which means your body weight comes down with it, and we're facilitating more muscle tissue maintenance. We're giving the proper, I often say strategic, we offer strategic carbohydrate ingestion. The carbs that I give you, I know exactly how and when they're going to be used. As long as I have a good, rapport with you, I know your lifestyle, you're telling me the truth. So we can eat a higher yield of carbohydrates than the average program and walk around considerably leaner. And I think what we've established with our plan is it works so well. But many others, they go to the synthetic toxic chemicals, they go to the calorie deprivations, they go to the fasting and the keto, all the exclusionary restrictive dietary patterns, which have been shown over the history of time. And Leo, you're a research scientist. That shit doesn't work over a long period of time.
Hey, Mike, can I ask you something? I'm very curious about this. You mentioned leaning out. And this, for some reason, the second you mentioned this to me, I watched an interview of a fighter the other day that I didn't know about before. He's a very interesting fighter from Australia who's a Samoan heavyweight. He has a lot of knockout power. I can't think of his name. Yes, exactly. So I was watching some of his fights, and I was, of course, so impressed that he seems to be like a natural brawler and stuff. But he's carrying a lot of body fat on him, and he's in the heavyweight. So I was thinking, if this guy lost the body fat and went down a weight class and he has this striking power, I mean, how did that not happen? Is it valuable to be overweight a little bit in the heavyweights? And would it not be better to go down?
Well, I'll answer and then I'll let Duane jump in. In my opinion, there is an ideal body mass for each weight class. Okay. So if you're a heavyweight competing between 205 and 265, you have to be within the category. Now, if you're walking around 220, 230 even, if you're walking around off season lean at 230, you're a 205 pounder.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
10% of body mass, we could get you down. If you're over 230, now you're more suited to the heavyweight weight class, right? If you're 206, you're considered a heavyweight, but you better not be fighting a guy like Francis Ngannou, who's cutting to make 266, right? 265 now, that because he's lean as hell, 10% body fat that size. Guys like Daniel Cormier, I always said Daniel Cormier, though he won the UFC heavyweight title and he had hard weight cuts to make 205 to fight John Jones. But you see him on the scale fighting John Jones, Daniel Cormier was still closer to the 30% body fat, even at 205, because he was not, in my opinion, I love Daniel, but I've said it to his face, and I've said it before, he was not living that 52-week healthy lifestyle. All humans, by the way, and we know, scientifically speaking, above 15% body fat, all-cause mortality data, hockey sticks. Males, relatively healthy adult males, once your body fat is chronically above 15%, the onset of chronic illness dramatically goes up. Below 15%, it stays low. What we try and do is say, hey, listen, all males, ladies, slightly different because they're a little more voluptuous, they hold fat differently, but we'll talk about the men right now. So that's most of the channel's, viewers, I would say. Surprisingly,
there's females now, but anyway.
Well, ladies, you listen. So ladies, we say mid-20s. 25 for ladies is the male 15 on average, but you accumulate body fat differently than men do, by the way. So then we want to say 12 to 14. That is the sweet spot for the average healthy adult. The average pro athlete, 12% or lower. So guys like Daniel, well, he should have had half the body fat he had. He should have been competing around 12%. A guy like Stipe Miocic, the reigning UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou, who I still believe is the UFC champion. Look at his body. These are lean. These are big humans. Stipe Miocic, one of, used to train with Trevor Wittman and friends with, Duane and such also. Man, that guy looks like a middleweight. He's just 6'4", whatever the hell it is. So to answer the question, let Duane jump in. Body fat matters regardless. And I'll close with this. They did a study years ago. The NSCA did a study on like a meta-analysis of injuries in the NFL. And what I believe they thought was they're going to see injuries based upon position. The fact they did not, the correlating factor of injuries was not position, it was body fat percentage. They found athletes with the highest body fat percentage had the highest incidence of lower body injuries, regardless of position. And that simply was determined, and I believe, due to the shearing force of the extra body mass. And I say, put a 20-pound weight pack on and start trying to move side to side real quick. What happens? That, a non-functional weight, as we call it, starts to whip back and forth, shearing at your joints. So when I'm in MMA and I'm wearing that 20-pound, 30-pound, 40-pound bag of fat, and I start to move my body, well, what happens? It's actually fighting against my movements and resisting. So guys like Daniel Cormier or whomever else that might be, not to use Daniel per se, they are limiting performance. Even if it's a micro movement are being limited, but the highest level, I mean, Duane's got the fastest knockout in UFC history. That is a microsecond. That's the difference between, I won't even say slipping. It's making the sound in slipping. That's the microsecond you get knocked out. So fat mass matters. And if you're an elite athlete training at the highest level, the Tom Brady's, the LeBron Jameses, the George St. Pierre's, they pay attention to that. Just being able to hit hard, yeah, you'll win some heavyweight fights, but you are not optimizing your potential. Off my soapbox.
Yep.
What do you think?
Agree. One thing that I got from Mr. Dolce, though, as far as to take something out of this is, and you asked me earlier what I'm really good at, teaching the highest level martial arts, but it's not what I want to do all the time because there's quality of life. And I think that's one thing that Mike Dolce pointed out to me is the quality of life that we're living as well, and making sure that it's a long lasting deal, not a short-term explosion. So overall longevity is the goal, because again, an athlete's career is short-lived for the most part, unless you're able to transition it to future generations and becoming a teacher and so on, if you have that route available or created anyway. But in short, that's what we all should be doing, is finding the best version of ourselves. And I wouldn't have minded seeing Daniel Cormier at a lighter weight either, and being the light heavyweight champion with a bit more discipline. But you can't really look past his discipline, because look at what he's done. He's achieved greater things in mixed martial arts than I did. So I can't, crank on him too hard, but it would have been good to see him at a lighter weight more often. I'll say that.
Imagine him, Daniel, at middleweight.
He could, yeah. I think with the proper discipline, it could be middleweight. But then some people, like, what do you think about this Dolce? People are just naturally, genetically carry more weight than others. Obviously, we're all different spectrums, right? Do you think each individual could operate on a 10% body fat, or some people are genetically, gifted to be heavier?
10%, I think that would be the ideal. 10% is very hard to achieve, but for the elite athlete,
or 25, yeah.
25 is you're fucking sick. You're going to be you're going to shave 10 years off your lifestyle, and you're going to manifest a series of chronic illness, most likely. Leo probably has better research than I, on what these will actually do. So that mid-teen.
We should mention a caveat just to be comprehensive. There are people that are not obese, but like have 20-30% body fat that have a lot of brown fat, like myself. When I did a surgery before, removed a bit of fat. The whole fat was, brother, when I saw it, I thought I was sick. The fat was dark brown. I went to the doctor. I was like, what is this? He's like, no, this is a healthy thing. These were years ago. Later on, I read about it, and about the browning of fat when it becomes thermologically active. So there are some people, I've read studies, centenarians, that have a little bit higher body fat. Some have genetic predispositions that protect them from it. Others have different kinds of fat. But generally, yeah, of course, yeah, Mike's absolutely
generally, right. And if that's great, if you fall into that category, hey, high five to you. Thank your parents, right? You lucked out most likely. The majority of people, and these are, once we sit down with a person, then we're treating the person, not the paper, right? I like that.
Of course, yeah.
You work one-on-one averages with the person, but in average, if you measure it, you can improve it. So let's get better. Right, that you've probably never seen a perfect jab, Duane, but I'm sure you've seen some really good ones. But you can probably always, I know you probably see 10 more things you can fix. The way they step, the force. There's a million things. They don't bring the hand back fast enough, high enough, whatever. They're not in position after that jab comes out. Same thing with our fitness, which is why I think what I do, blending that using a martial arts overtone, is nutritionally, health-wise, there's always room for improvement, and it's self-mastery. I look in the mirror, if I'm living a perfect lifestyle, my blood work is perfect, I have excellent energy, like things are just ramping forward, and I step on the scale, I'm 12.6 body fat. I'm good. Like, I don't need to be 10% body fat. And, I fluctuate, I intentionally bring my body fat higher and low because I like to test a lot of the theories that I put out. But I think to answer your question, everyone is different. Now, me, I am not naturally a lean guy. I'm just naturally not a lean guy. In order for me to look really lean, even when my body fat is lower, I have to manipulate electrolytes in water to look as lean as I actually am, right? That's just the nature of the way my body looks, that's just what it is. So with that,
let's give another example to Duane. Also, interesting thing. Like, Duane, think about it like this: if you were a fat kid when you were younger, you developed a lot of what they call adipocytes, fat cells, and these fat cells they die, but you have to starve them for like years. So usually they stay alive, but they're like empty. But while they're empty, they release certain hormones to your body, like leptin or other different kinds of hormones that cause. There's adiponectin, a lot of different kinds of hormones that affect how your psychology is going. So you feel hungrier even though those fat cells are empty. So depending on how you were as a kid and your epigenetics and stuff like that, Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, Mike.
No. Long.
But on this topic, you mentioned, Duane, about longevity. I don't want it to keep you too long. I really wanted to ask you about brain health, because I've heard you talk about it in a couple of interviews. And this is one of my personal biggest interests. I've always wanted to ask an MMA coach about whether, do people do things to protect the brain from not concussions, but just slight brain damage? So for example, there are some medications I've come across, because my main research interest area is like neuroprotection, avoiding dementia, neurodegenerative disease. And so there are some things like, for example, I don't know if you know this, Duane, but if you block adrenaline, we're using a short-acting adrenaline blocker for 6 to 8 hours, you can dramatically lessen the damage from an impact to the head. The long-term damage, dramatically. And these things are called beta blockers. They're given to snipers, for example, when they're in war to steady their hands from the adrenaline. They're also given to public speakers. Totally harmless. Actually, they're one of the most life-saving medications in cardiovascular disease. But usually they give them to people all the week because they have high adrenaline. What I do with some of my strength athletes is after their hardest workout of the week, to improve their recovery, they just take one beta blocker after the workout. Right after the workout, they take a block adrenaline for a few hours, because adrenaline also limits healing because of inflammation, stuff like that. But most importantly, adrenaline really worsens the damage to the brain. Like if I had athletes, every time they'd spar, like say they spar 3 times a week, I'd say those 3 days a week, take just one beta blocker right afterwards. Slow the adrenaline system for 6 hours. It'll limit it a little bit. But there's so many other options. Like we talked about cerebrolysin before. There's a drug called sodium valproate, which is very powerful at being neuroprotective acutely. I'm curious, what do people do? And do you think there's room to expand? Because I really think that a lot of brains could be saved early on.
Well, I was unaware that these beta blockers can actually help reduce adrenaline, which would actually correlate to
dramatically.
Yes, I didn't know that. So right there, that's going to be shared more. That's nice. But the way I choose to develop my athletes, I mean, there's 2 things that need to happen. One, they need to improve in many categories, and they need to be safe, healthy, and happy for the fight, whether they're actual fighter or a civilian, right? So I don't have my guys do hard sparring. They'll hard spar once a week because that needs to happen if they're going to compete. But we do a whole bunch of sparring drills and Dutch drills. So just like you see wrestlers drill, same concept, just with striking scenarios. So yes, I can say up until TJ's last fight where he received a head cut, where he had to postpone a fight, none of my fighters ever had to pull out of a fight because of injury until just recently.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. I was going to ask you about that also, how often people should spar and stuff like that long term, but
it once a week, hard sparring. It doesn't have to be full power, but high intensity, because you're going to get tired and have the adrenaline to be able to control that, right? So be able to, what does he say? Stress management, and be able to still implement your game plan. But sparring drills, every day sparring drills should happen, which is how I run my classes.
I would be remiss, Duane, if I didn't ask you before we let you go, because I really enjoyed talking to you, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I would be remiss because my channel focuses a lot on, because we do strength sports, we talk about PEDs a lot. I wanted to ask in MMA a couple of general questions, like, do you think that PED use is actually widespread in post-USADA UFC? But
I bet you half of these people are freaking taking stuff for sure. Okay, I know. I remember like most of my fights, I'd get into the clinch and they'd feel fucking solid. And I'm like, man, these guys are strong. And I used to think, well, if they let go of me, I'm going to knock them out. So they're fighting for their life. Maybe that's why they're so strong. And then not find out. I would say more than half these people are doing steroids for sure, PEDs, whatever, doing some stuff that maybe they should or shouldn't be doing. So, or maybe I should have just took some stuff. They'll be like, yeah, well, let's do it. So, who knows? Right?
But Duane, do they have like chemists working for them that design like unique, because WADA only tests a certain amount of chemicals. And I imagine that if you had a cool chemist with you, he could slightly change a molecule, make sure none of the metabolites of that molecule are tested.
You know what's funny is I found an individual, Thomas Denny in Hawaii, and I knew the guy he was buying stuff from. So I knew he was on some stuff. And I think back then, I don't think fighters were making enough money to have a personal pharmacist or what was it?
Yeah, like a chemist. Yeah.
A chemist in their, in their back pocket or access to that, or maybe there's just more. Maybe it's not as expensive as I think it would be. I don't know. I think like high level, like people who are getting paid a couple $100,000 or whatever, if they have the money, I know like it's a human inclination to want to be their best performance. And if you could take something to perform better, I'm sure that's why people are doing it. You know, like, man, I'm so good, but I could be a little bit better. So, I mean, I get it, but still, that's still another form of discipline to be an honest competitor as well. So, I guess it just depends on who believes honesty or what definition you abide by with that. So I'm pretty sure some people are having custom stuff made that's not getting flat.
Interesting. Okay. I'm so glad I heard you say that.
There's a gym.
Shit.
Duane will know. I'm not going to say the name online, but very famous gym in California that years ago now, I don't know, because I'm out of that scene. Years ago, they had a chemist on staff and worked with some of the biggest names in the end. They had a chemist on staff, and this guy would come in the room with a duffel bag. And this is back when IVs were still legal, and he'd be just lining athletes up like it was like an infirmary, like a makeshift medic, on the battlefield. He'd be lining their athletes up and just running lines. And one of the athletes I was working with knew a fighter on their team, and they were talking about having this guy set him up with an IV. And I was like, no, fuck no, like, because you don't know what is this? And he would have all his concoctions, literally running lines with his special mixtures, putting them into the IVs and loading these athletes up. I'll say it offline because, liability and whatnot, to be fair. But yes, some of these teams, for sure. Nowadays, who knows? It's a lot more closed door because the USADA is here, thankfully, and they cleaned up a lot of it. But if you really step back and look around, you know exactly who's doing what.
Well,
I do nutritional IVs, or nutritional vitamin IVs or whatever, the Myers cocktail IVs. And I have a good relationship with the people that we go to, and I'll have them come to the dojo sometimes in a van. So we'll have 4 or 5, sometimes 10 people in the dojo lined up on IVs. It looks like a freaking medic ward. Yeah, it's hilarious. But yeah, part of the same scenario that you've seen at the gym. Yeah.
By the way, do you do choline and L carnitine IV? Because that's a great idea, by the way.
I do the Myers cocktail. I'm not even quite sure what the hell's in it. It's looking like a fucking bag of Mountain Dew. That's
you can make it a little bit better. I have some cool ideas actually for that.
I need to put some beta blockers in there.
I have many ideas for you on that.
I'm trying to save my brain.
Exactly. Well, Duane, we'll let you go. The last thing I want to ask you is just one thing, because I keep forgetting to ask every time I have a Caucasian on the show. I want to ask this question. So this is the question. I'm Caucasian to some degree. Also, I have a long nose. If I became a fighter, would I have broken my nose? I've seen your nose isn't long.
My nose has more bumps than the freaking stock market right now.
Yeah, your nose has a bump. So I wanted to ask you, did it explain this to us? So for Caucasians that are fighting, do you just break your nose automatically the first couple of years, and then does it keep re-breaking, or can it just I've
never really had my nose. My nose has been broken, but not like where it hurt too bad. It was a little offset, right?
Yeah.
My buddy, Christian Allen, he's the trainer of Corey Sandhagen, but he's hilarious, man. I love that guy. He's a freaking ninja. But years ago, he goes, some people say that when they're done fighting, they'll get their nose fixed. Christian says, if I have my nose broken, I'm done fighting. So I was like, all right, I got what you're saying, but just don't get hit, right? I think there's a lot of fighters who don't have a broken nose, have the head motion, that distance control, but I guess just get it fixed when you're done there, but hopefully just don't get punched in the actual nose and learn to roll with the punches.
Okay, so it's not always like a massive nose moving. You can just break it slightly and get away with it.
Yeah. I've had my nose. Oh, so hold on. I go to punch my buddy in the body one time and he knees me, and my nose it doesn't bleed. It bleeds in the nostrils, but it swells up inside my nose. So I had cauliflower in my nose. It's crazy. And I go to this my boss's doctor, and the doctor asked me, hey, do you do any Coke? He asked me, and I'm drinking a Diet Coke, and I'm like, how the hell is a Diet Coke mess up my nose? I was like so confused. The boss says, oh, no. He's asking about cocaine. I was like, no, I don't do cocaine. But when that guy lands my nose, and then there's a hole in there, and then he's seen me, and then here's what he goes, oh yeah, you had your nose broken before. So I didn't even know I had my nose broken. But anyway, what was your question?
Duane, the same exact, I'm not a fighter obviously, but the same thing happened to me. I went to a doctor here because I had hearing issues, and I go to the head of ear, nose, and throat surgery at Cedars-Sinai, and he's like, hey, maybe something to do with your nose. Let me look inside it. He looks into my nose and he's like, this is a problem. I'm going to need this long tube. I need to look inside your nose. So he puts this long ass tube inside my nose with no pain thing, puts it inside. Then he goes, whoa. He said, you have a lot of scar tissue. Have you broken your nose? And I said, I don't know. He said, no, you've broken your nose a bunch of times. I had no idea.
Wow.
Apparently I broke my nose a few times. But he also asked, he was like, do you use inhalable drugs or something like that?
Same thing. Hey, but what was the trauma to your nose? You hit it on what?
I guess when I was a kid, someone broke my nose a few times. We used to fight as kids, you know, and I felt it. Like, I didn't know it broke, but I felt it. I thought for it to break, it's gotta like
cauliflower in your nose. Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you about the cauliflower? Firas Dahabia said if you cut open the cauliflower, like the swelling, it won't cauliflower. Is that true? Like when it swells after a sparring match?
Well, I understand the cartilage breaks in your ear and then it bleeds in your ear, and then if you don't remove that blood, it'll harden. So he's talking about lancing it, having the blood drain out, which is what they did to my nose, or else that would harden into a big ball. So it's there. But just lance it, drain it, and then have it touched up. Then you get it touched again the next day, and it bleeds again. So you kind of damage if you don't. But that's why it's good to wear the wrestling headgear.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, Duane, it was such a pleasure to talk to you.
That's the answer. Wrestling headgear. Don't get hit. Yeah.